Jews have done on this day of the 9th of Av for thousands of years, and that is to chant, to pray, to sing, to read the book of Eicha, and to think about the loss of the two temples in Jerusalem, the loss of God's presence, and also think about how our own human actions as people, as societies, also lead to tragedy in our midst. So part of our lesson of this day over the millennia is of Jewish resilience and all those who have come up to try and destroy the Jewish people. But there also is an element to it where, along with looking at all those who came to destroy the Jewish people, well, on one hand, the Romans will always be the Romans, the Babylonians will be the Babylonians, and we can't always stop the Spanish Inquisition from being a Spanish Inquisition, but there is a place, our tradition teaches, where we can also look at the actions of our own societies and see where our moral and ethical and spiritual failings help contribute to the loss of grace, of God's presence and protection. And I think it's obvious to see that when we're divided and when we're not and distracted, that opens the door for tragedy to befall us. So as we're going to be talking later on in the service about the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa and Sinat Chinam and baseless hatred, that was considered to be the reason for the destruction of the Second Temple. But first, we're going to just have our Mariv service, which is done in a little bit more somber melody than we usually do. This is a somber day, a sad day, but ultimately the purpose of all of it, in my mind, is to find hope. And through all of the looking at the destruction, looking at the tragedy, and it's not hard to look at our world right now and see all of it, from this week in Israel to Ukraine to all over the world, to look at it, but to try and hold on to that Jewish hope that's kept us going for thousands of years, that we can find a new beginning out of it. And that's the lesson of Tisha B'Av. Tomorrow afternoon is when we're taught the Mashiach, the Messiah, is born. On Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the year, is when Messiah will be born. So let's begin our evening with a Mariv service in our booklets.
That's on page 1.
On page 1, please rise.
והוא רחום יכפר עוון וישחית והרבה לישיבה פה ולא יאיר כל חמתו אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קורנו ברכו את אדוני המבורך
ברוך אדוני מבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Please be seated.
חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב הרבים. אהבת עולם. באהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושיננתם לפניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל. Bottom of page 5. Adonai Elohechem emet, emet v'amunah. Page 7. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורת אלות אוסף אלה מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה זה ליאנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד בני אמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל. We're on page 9. Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. ברוך אדוני לעולם. אמן ואמן. ברוך אדוני ביום, ברוך אדוני בלילה. And the last bit before the Chatzi Kaddish on page 11. כי המלכות שלך היא, ולעולמי עד ימלוך בכבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך בכבודו, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ועל כל מעשיו. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעמד יברא כרותי, וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון וימכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בגלה וזמן קריב, אמרו, אמן. שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמי יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבעתה ונחמתה נמירן מעלמה ואמרו Amen.
Please rise for the silent Amidah. We begin on page 13. Continue silently through to page 21.
Oh, say shalom, shalom, shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. Oh, someone's at the door.
Please be seated. We're on page 23, Kadishalem.
יתקרא ויקדש שמי רבה, ילמד ורקרותי, וימליך חכותי, בחיי חונו וימי חונו, וחיי רבית ישראל, פגלה בזמן קריב ימרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם עלל מעל מהיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו ואלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. תקבל צלותיהון ובאותיהון לכל ישראל קודם אבון ושמיה ויאמרו אמן. יש למה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו amen.
So as we conclude our Kaddish Shalem, we're going to be turning towards the reading of Eicha, the book of Lamentations. If you are online, then you could go to safaria.org to find the book. And so the book, this is what Jews have been reading for thousands of years. And it is, on this day, we say both temples was destroyed, but there were also so many other Jewish calamities, and even the Midrash teaches this was a day when Adam and Eve were banished from the garden. But the first Tisha B'Av in history is the destruction of the first temple, and Eicha is Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah's. Traditionally, he's ascribed to be the author. His lament at seeing Jerusalem destroyed. And so this year, I'd like to turn us to two ways of looking at this. One is just whenever you read Eicha, you have to be present. One just goes through the book, reading the horrors of what happened to the most beautiful spiritual city in the world, Jerusalem, on that day, the horrors that Jeremiah was experiencing. And elsewhere in Jeremiah's prophecies, he talks about hope. He talks about what will happen with this and that. But here, there's none of that. It's just witnessing all of the nightmares coming true. But today I also want to turn us to this other very difficult teaching that the Jewish people, and this is more about the second temple, but were part of the reason the temple was destroyed, right? We teach that the second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred, and specifically baseless hatred between Jewish people And this is illustrated by the story in the Talmud of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. So I'm going to tell the story, and then we're going to start to think about it. And between the chapters of Eicha, we'll have a little discussion and we'll do some singing. So the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa from the Talmud is this, that there was one wealthy man in Jerusalem in its last days of the Second Temple who wanted to invite Kamsa to his party, but instead Bar Kamsa came and joined the party, and Bar Kamsa was his enemy. And so when he realized that it was his enemy, Bar Kamsa, who was there, and not Kamsa, he approached him and in front of everybody said, "You have to leave my party now, you're my enemy." And so Bar Kamsa said, well, he didn't want to be shamed. So he said, I'll pay for my drink and my food, just let me stay. And then he said, no, you have to leave. I would completely refuse. He said, well, I'll pay for half of all of the party. He said, no, you still have to leave. He said, I'll pay for the entire party. He said, no, you have to leave. And he grabbed him and kicked him out of the party. And so the way the Midrash tells it, then Bar Kamsa, seeing himself being humiliated in front of all the rabbis, in front of everybody there, thought, well, they're complicit in what's happening, and he wanted to go cause some trouble. So he went to see Caesar. Not sure how he got to Caesar, but he got to Caesar, and he said, the Jews are starting a rebellion. And Caesar said, well, how can you prove such a thing? He said, well, if you offer an offering to the temple, they're not going to offer it for you. So Caesar brought a perfectly good offering, and he said, offer it as appropriate. But unknown to him, Bar Kamsa, this is the story in Midrash, punched the calf in the eye and made it blemished, which meant it wasn't able to be offered anymore. And then they refused to offer it in the temple. And then Caesar got upset, thought the Jews were rebelling, and then that's how it all started. That's just their idea. One way of looking at baseless hatred. So as we begin to chant the first chapter, like everybody to think about what is baseless hatred? Where do you see baseless hatred in our world, in your own life? And what is it? What is it that characterizes baseless hatred? Sinat chinam. Free hatred is another way of looking at it. So we're going to read Eicha. Eicha is on page 29, the first chapter. And I'll start in Hebrew and then we'll switch to English and we'll go around in that way. Eicha yashva badad hayira bat yam hayta ke'almana הבאתי בגויים, שרתי במדינות, הייתה למס. בכה תבכה בלילה, ודמעתה לחייה, אין לה מנחם מכל אוהביה. קוראיה בגדו בה, היו לה לאויבים. קלטה יהודה מעוני ומרוב עבודה, היא ישבה בגויים לא מצאה מנוח, כה רודפיה השיגוה בין המצרים. דרכי ציון אבלות, מבלי בהם מועד, כל שעריה שוממין, כהניה נאנחים. בתולותיה נוגות והימר לנו. היו צריה לראש אויביה שלו, כי אדוני הוגה על רוב פשעיה, עולליה הכו שבי לפני צער. We're in verse 6. Alan, would you like to continue reading? Try to get down on the floor to do this.
Verse 6, gone from Zion is all her splendor. Her leaders are as deer that find no pasture. Exhausted, they flee before their pursuer. In the days of her affliction and anguish, Jerusalem recalls all the treasures that were formerly hers. Now that her people fall helplessly into the hand of the enemy, Her adversaries gloat over her downfall. Because Jerusalem has grievously sinned, she has become contaminated. All who once honored her now despise her, for they have seen her shame. She herself sighs and turns away from their gaze. Her corruption clung to her skirts. She considered not her future, and therefore she has fallen. Alas, there is none to comfort her. Behold, O Lord, my suffering, for the enemy has become arrogant. The enemy has carried away all her treasures. She has seen foreign nations enter her temple. Ah, yes, those very ones whom thou hast forbidden to enter therein. All her people languish. They search for bread. They barter their treasures for food in order to keep alive. See, O Lord, and behold how abject I have become. Let it not happen to you, all you who pass by. Behold, and see if there be any pain, like the pain with which the Lord in his anger has afflicted me. From on high, he has sent down a fever into my bones, and it has weakened me. He spread a net for my feet, ensnaring me. He has left me faint and ridden with pain all day long. He has knit my sins one to the other and pressed them upon the neck like a yoke, sapping my strength. The Lord has delivered me to an enemy over whom I cannot prevail. The Lord has made powerless all my mighty men. He has assembled an army against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden Jerusalem as in a winepress. For all this I weep, my eyes overflow with tears, for the Comforter who could bring me relief has deserted me. My children are desolate because the foe has prevailed. Zion stretches out her hands, but there is none to comfort her. The Lord has commanded that all those who surround Jacob should be his adversaries. Jerusalem is among them as one unclean. The Lord is righteous. I have rebelled against his commandment. Hearken, all you nations, and behold my pain. My maidens and my young men have gone into captivity. I called to my allies, but they have deceived me. My priests and my elders perished in the city as they searched for food to keep alive. O Lord, consider my anguish. I writhe in pain, and my heart is turned within me, for I have wantonly rebelled. Outside, the sword slays. At home, death threatens. My foes have heard that I am helpless, and yet there is none to comfort me. They have heard of my plight and rejoice that thou hast caused it. As thou wilt bring the day which thou hast proclaimed, that day when their lot shall be like mine. Judge all their wickedness, and do unto them as thou hast done unto me for all my sins. For my sighs are many, and my heart is faint.
Shkoch. So we are going to sing a song from this first chapter, and Aaron Bernstein is going to be leading us. The verse, I've got song sheets, but the verse we just said was 116, for all this I weep. Pass it along. Should get you there.
Aaron Bernstein is a key member of our davening team, and this is a song that he knows.
Check, check.
Alhelechani vokia, ani vokia, alhelechani vokia, ani vokia, alhelechani vokia. Ani vohia, alelekani vohia, ani vohia. Aini, 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 yadahamayim. Kirahag mi meini, anake me shiv nafshi. Aini, 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 yadahamai. Kirahag mi meini, anake me shiv nafshi. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Yeah, la, lie, 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 lie. La 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Da 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 da. Ya ya. Ya da dim bam ba da dim bam ba da dum. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. Da 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 ya 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 da dim bum ba ba bum bum ba da dum.
Thank you, Yeshkoach. So I'd like to revisit that question and begin our discussion of what is baseless hatred. We want to talk, have an idea or a thought or a place where you think they see baseless hatred. And online, if anybody would like to talk online, Charles, if you don't mind unmuting them. I don't know if we have the speaker set up. Windows has something to say. So as everybody thinks, I wanted to share a few thoughts about, I mean, there's many, what makes hatred baseless? So on one hand, there's no hatred that's 100%. It always starts somewhere, but the hatred becomes baseless when it loses control on some level. And I think we've all seen it when suddenly, when someone feels attacked, like in that story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, and you feel hurt, and suddenly there's that animal instinct to strike back with everything you got, and to get them back. And there's no thought of what will happen to them, and it's just a total animal kind of instinct, and it leads to tragedy.
Well, I can think that example of what's happening is with the whole social media and the political unrest that's happening in America. I mean, it's pretty strong, and it creates a lot of strong emotions and strong strife. So that would, to me, be an example. Just some of the more extreme things that are happening in this country right now.
I think you're right. In the extreme examples in this country and in Israel the last week, when we've seen when you push the division between people to such an extent that it creates ruptures, right? It creates ruptures in the society and within people that then is very, very, very hard to heal.
It's not rational. It's visceral. It's something you can't control. It comes from the inside. It doesn't come from the head down. It comes from the inside out.
Thank you. One thought that came to me as I was thinking about baseless hatred and the shootings in this country that we've seen over all these past few decades, and if there's some element of baseless hatred that's channeled there by the people who commit the horrible shootings. Anybody else? Baseless hatred.
Picking up on the example of social media, and we've probably all experienced either reacting to or saying something that somebody reacts to that, because you're communicating in words, you don't see faces, you don't see expressions, you misjudge what was said, you misinterpret what it was said, it gets all blown up. And sometimes somebody's big enough to say, I goofed, I'm sorry. But all too often it just gets blown up and it's left there.
Thank you for bringing that. And the way on social media, you don't see face to face the person you're talking to. And so there's lack. What common thread I see with a lot of these ideas of baseless hatred is when the filters are taken away, we don't have the filters anymore. And then suddenly some of the stuff that comes out from inside the human soul and from the human mind and emotions is not always very constructive.
I imagine that there's a large amount of sort of free-floating anger in the world. And I think the most dangerous forms of baseless hatred are when that anger gets directed, gets channeled, gets gathered up by social forces.
Thanks so much. I really resonated with that. It's, once the genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to put it back in the bottle. And the forces of hate and of this country and the far right in this country and anti-Semitism of the past number of years, and how once that's more out in the open, it's hard to then control it. Anybody else?
Rabbi, if I may. This is Octavio online.
Oh, great, Octavio. What you got?
I would say that baseless hatred is malicious emotion that that grows inside of us, and it fails to recognize the dignity of humans or humanity, especially those around us that often we see as an inconvenience for us. We see them below us, and I think that this emotion makes us oppress, sometimes even silence and exclude people from being part of us as humans. So I think that it's this emotion that creates a lot of pain and suffering.
Thank you. And Octavio you're a therapist as well, so something you bring from your field. But I resonate with the idea of the pain that it brings to both parties. And in that story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, there's no winner. Everybody's a loser in that story. Right? Everybody, it's such a rabbinic story, but it's pointed in how it describes how baseless hatred begins and how it then spirals out of control. In the end, nobody wins out of it, but it brings pain and suffering to all. I think unless anyone else they wanted to take the.
I was just thinking that it seems that it's about perhaps trying to I guess be right instead of just doing what's right. So the obsession to like I am right or in the right becomes more powerful than I just want to do the right thing.
Thank you. Yes, so interesting. When we have to just be right, and push it and push it and push it, and doesn't lead. It leads to not liking those who are not right. So two thoughts. I don't know if anybody else wants to share anything, but as we continue, I want to have a second stage to this conversation later on, when we try and think of examples, concrete examples that we've experienced of senseless hatred. Either we have experienced it ourselves or others that we've seen or just in the world around us, concrete examples. And I want us to start that shift towards thinking about acts of baseless love. But I did want to bring some of, in this has been a very hard week for Israel, and with the passing of the first step of the judicial overhaul, and incredibly deep tensions in Israel at the moment, and the fact that it happened a few days before Tisha B'Av is just so hard to understand why they would have pushed it then. But what I wanted to share was that I heard from people today in Jerusalem who are going down to the Kotel, the Western Wall, and they usually go to the main section where, all the, where it happens. And they said that with everything going on, they couldn't go and pray with the ultra-Orthodox after everything that's happening because they felt so angry at it being pushed on them. And they said they're going to go to other sections of the Kotel, and they usually do, because and so it's hard to, when the divisions are so deep and gone to such an extent, it's not easy to then bring them back, and when so much hurt's been caused on both sides of any situation. So let's continue, and I'd like to, we'll turn to the second chapter. Second chapter is actually what?
33,
33. 34.
34 in English, yes.
Alas, how in his anger the Lord has covered Zion with a cloud. He has hurled Israel's glory from heaven to the earth, remembering not the temple on his day of indignation. The Lord unsparingly has ruined all the villages of Jacob. In his wrath, he has leveled the fortress of Judah. He has degraded her kingdom and her leaders. In fierce anger, he has cut down the mighty ones of Israel. Before the enemy, he has withdrawn his own protection from his people. He has destroyed Jacob like a flaming fire which devours everything round about. He has bent his bow like an enemy, standing with right hands uplifted. He has slain all her cherished ones in the tent of Zion. He has poured out his fury like a fire. The Lord has become like an enemy. He has brought ruin to Israel, destroying all her palaces and her fortresses, multiplying in Judah moaning and bemoaning. He has uprooted his temple as if it were a garden and demolished his place of assembly. The Lord has abolished in Zion both festival and Sabbath. In indignation, he has rejected king and priest alike. The Lord has discarded his altar and abhorred his temple. To the enemy, he has handed over the walls of its palaces. In God's temple, the enemy hilariously shouts as if it were a day of festivity. The Lord planned to destroy the walls of Zion. He stretched out the line and did not withdraw his hand from destruction. He has made the rampart and wall mourn. They languish together. Her gates are sunk into the ground. He has broken their bars. Her king and leaders are exiled among the nations. The Torah is no more. Her prophets are bereft of divine vision. The elders of Zion sit mournfully upon the ground and are silent. They have covered their heads with dust and girded themselves with sackcloth. The maidens of Jerusalem bow their heads to the ground. My eyes grow weak from weeping. My heart is troubled. I am deeply pained for the destruction of my people, because young children and infants faint in the city streets. They cry to their mothers, "Where is corn and wine?" And they faint like wounded men gasping out their lives in their mother's bosom. To what can I compare you? And to whom can I liken you, O Jerusalem? Whose misfortune can equal yours, that I might comfort you, O Zion? For your destruction is as vast as the ocean. Who can heal you? Your prophets have deluded you with false and foolish visions. They did not reveal to you your iniquity so that you might escape captivity. They devised for you oracles of falsehood and flattery. Passerby gloat over you. They hiss and toss their heads at the city of Jerusalem. Is this the city men called the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth? All your enemies open their mouths against you. They hiss and gnash their teeth and say, "We have swallowed her up. Certainly this is the day for which we have longed. We have found it. At last we have seen it. The Lord has carried out what he intended. He has fulfilled the threat which he made long ago. He has unsparingly destroyed and has caused the enemy to rejoice over you. He has brought triumph to the foe. Let your heart cry to the Lord. O wall of Zion, day and night, let tears run down like a river. Give yourself no respite. Let not your eyes cease from weeping. Arise, cry out in the night, at the beginning of each night watch. Pour out your heart like water before the Lord. Lift up your hands to him for the sake of your infants who faint from hunger in the streets. Behold, O Lord, and consider against whom thou hast done all these things. Are women to eat their children, the infants they have fondled? Are priests and prophets to be slain in God's temple? Young and old lie homeless in the streets. My maidens and my young men are fallen by the sword. Without pity hast thou slain them in the day of thy wrath. Thou hast called as in the day of assembly, my terror on every side. No one escaped or survived on the day of the Lord's anger. All whom I have nursed and nurtured, my enemy has destroyed.
We're now going to sing another verse from this chapter. This was the melody that Cantor was singing at the beginning. It's the second one on our song sheets. It's verse 19 of chapter 2.
Shiri kamayim kamayim libech nochach b'nei Adonai. Shiri kamayim kamayim libech nochach b'nei Adonai. Shiri kamayim libech nochach b'nei Adonai. Shiri kamayim kamayim libech nochach b'nei Adonai.
So let's continue our conversation from before. And could anybody think of an example they wanted to share of seeing that baseless kind of hatred?
Yes, Rabbi, I had can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. This is Gabriel. Sorry, I wanted to see if the mic was working. Yes. I can think of an example. I think some of the way that again with an Israel example that non-Orthodox converts are sometimes treated in the country kind of shows a lot of that.
Thank you. Right. So Gabriel said that the non-Orthodox converts in Israel are sometimes treated with hatred, and unfortunately, it is true. And in general, so we know religion can inflame these kinds of hatreds, and in Israel, there's not much tolerance between the streams of Judaism and the Reform and Masorti movements in general are not treated very well by the rabbinate and by others. I think it's a good example. Anyone else? So I add two. The one that came to my mind of once driving right here up Harlem, and there was someone who was turning left and crossing the street out of McDonald's to go north. And there was, you could see an elderly couple in a car who honked at him. And this man just out of the window starts screaming at them in such a violent, unnice way. I've almost never felt such extreme hatred and violence just in words, total road rage at this cute little couple in their little car. And then somehow the kind of hatred stuck with me. Anybody else? Examples of baseless hatred?
Well, I guess in the week that Emmett Till's home and church became a national monument, I suppose the brutal murder of Emmett Till so many years ago.
Thank you for sharing. We can think of so many of these examples through history, but I wanted to bring one that is maybe close to of our day-to-day lives. But this happened at a different synagogue years ago. But I shared this last Friday night too, but a synagogue where there were two members of this synagogue who didn't get along very well. And over years and years, it just was the case. And they each had their group of friends and their group of people. But then one year, for whatever reason, it seemed like one of the two decided the other one was beyond the pale, very kamsa and bar kamsa-ish, and started to make them feel unwelcome in every way. And the other one reciprocated, and soon it became talking about not just how they hate each other, but each other's spouses and each other's children, and just that kind of spiraling down. And this became really unpleasant. But at the end of that story, so they had actually some common friends in their group of friends. Both were popular people, but their friends helped bring them together. And at the end, they were able to find common ground despite all the venom that had gone back and forth. And were able to tolerate and even be in the same shul together. They didn't have to build another shul to go to. Anybody else? Any kind of example of baseless hatred that comes to mind, of that unbridled hatred?
Hello, Rabbi. This is Mark Wachowski.
Hi, Mark.
Hi. I just had one additional thought to add out of the
Sure.
kind of current events, and that's what has happened recently, of all things, to the Bud Light campaign. They put a trans person on the cans of their beer and essentially blew up the brand because there was so much hate and revulsion that everyone just refused to buy the product anymore because they didn't want to be associated with it.
Thank you for sharing that. And then you want to say something?
No.
No, definitely. In the in these culture wars that we're talking about in our country, there's so much hatred, and people don't think of how it actually affects individuals to experience that. So we see there's so much hatred of this type. It could go on for a long time, and then we wonder why humanity isn't progressing very much. But I'd like to turn to this other side of this aspect, which is we talk about, well, what's the opposite of sinat chinam, and that's ahavat chinam, that's baseless love, and what is that? How would you define that, and how do you do that, and how does it what does it look like to do it in the world, and what kind of effect does it have? Let's think about that as we go to our third chapter. We're on page 38.
I am the man who has seen affliction under the rod of God's anger. He has led me and caused me to walk in darkness and not in light. He turned his hand against me again and again all day long. He has made my skin and my flesh old. He has broken my bones. He has heaped upon the bitterness and misery. He has placed me in the netherworld as those who have long been dead. He has fenced me in so that I cannot go forth. He has made my chain heavy. Even when I cry and call for help, he shuts out my prayer. He has blocked my way with boulders and made my paths bewildering. He is to me like a bear lying in wait, as a lion in ambush. He has turned me away from my paths and pulled me in pieces. He has made me desolate. He has bent his bow and made me a target for his arrow. He has shot his arrows into my body. I have become a derision to all my people, the subject of their taunting all the day. He has filled me with bitterness and has salted me with wormwood. He has broken my teeth with gravel stones and covered me with ashes. I have no more peace. I have forgotten prosperity. And I said, gone is my strength and my expectation from God. Remember my affliction and my anguish, which is like wormwood and gall. I still remember them, and I am bowed down. But this I recall, and therefore I have hope. The mercies of the Lord are not consumed. His loving compassions never fail. They are renewed every morning. Great is God's faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, I say. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who have faith in him. So then what seek him? It is good to wait patiently for God's deliverance. It is good for a man that he be disciplined in his youth. Let him sit alone in silence when the Lord punishes him. Let him submit to his punishment. Perchance there's still hope. Let him turn his cheek to his oppressor and be filled with remorse. For the Lord will not forsake us forever.
What line are we on? 32. Oh, okay. Yeah. Though he cause grief, he will have compassion according to his abounding mercies. For he does not willingly afflict nor grieve the children of men, that prisoners be cruelly treated, that a man be deprived of justice before the Most High, that a man be defrauded of his legal rights. Of all this the Lord disapproves. Who can bring anything about unless the Lord commands it? Are not evil and good alike decreed by the Most High? Why should mortal man complain when he is punished for his sins? Let us search and examine our ways and return to the Lord. Let us sincerely pray with our hearts unto God in heaven. We have sinned and we have rebelled, and therefore thou hast not pardoned. Thou hast covered thyself with anger, and hast pursued us. Thou hast slain unsparingly. Thou hast covered thyself with a cloud, so that no prayer can pass through. Thou hast made us but offscouring, refuse among the nations. All our enemies have opened their mouth wide to denounce us. Terror and ensnarement come upon us, desolation and destruction. My eyes overflow with tears because of the destruction of my people. My eyes overflow unceasingly and continually, until the Lord look down and behold from heaven. The sight of my people's misery in the city has caused me anguish. Without cause, my enemies have hunted me as if I were a bird. They have imprisoned me in a dungeon and have cast a stone to cover up the pit. Water flowed over my head. I said, I am cut off. Out of the lowest depth I called upon thy name, O Lord. Thou heardest my voice. Hide not thine ear when I cry unto thee. Thou didst draw near when I called upon thee. Thou saidst, fear not. O Lord, thou hast pleaded my cause and saved my life. O Lord, thou hast seen the wrongs done unto me. Judge thou my cause. Thou hast seen their vengeance and their evil designs against me. Thou hast heard, O Lord, all their reproaches and plots against me, the words of my attackers and their utterances against me all day long. Behold how in the coming and going I am subject to their taunting songs. Punish them, O Lord, according to the evil that they have done. Give them hardness of heart. May thy curse be upon them. Pursue them in anger. Destroy them from under thy heavens.
It's appropriate on this night to sing a song in Yiddish. Yiddish, the language of so many victims who perished during the Holocaust. This song was written by Mark Warshawski about the early part of the 20th century, and it foreshadows the Holocaust. It's from the era of the pogroms. It's called Dem Milner's Tränen, the Miller's Tears. I'll sing some of it in Yiddish, and you'll get the gist of it in the English translation that I sing, that was written by Theodor Bickel. Oi, wieviel Jahren sind wir seinen verfahren, sind ich bin am Milner Otado. Die Räder drehen sich, die Ohren gehen sich, ich bin schon alt und greis und grau. Die Räder drehen sich, die Ohren gehen sich, ich bin schon alt und greis und grau. It's been so long now, so very long now, I've been a miller every day. The wheels are spinning fast as all the years run past, and I have grown so old and gray. Now they will chase me, they will displace me. The mill will never be the same. The wheels are spinning fast as all the years run past, without an end and without aim. Where will I live now? Will strangers give now the help it came from only you? The wheels are spinning fast as all the years run past, and as they go, so goes the Jew. Wo will ich wohnen? Wer wird mich scheunen? Ich bin schon alt und bin schon müd. Die Räder drehen sich, die Ohren gehen sich. Und euch mit See geht euch der Jid. Die Räder drehen sich, die Ohren gehen sich. Und euch mit See geht euch der Jid.
Let's turn to chapter 4, page 41. היכיו עם זהב, ישנה הכתם הטוב, השתפכנה אבני קודש, וראש כל חוצות, בני ציון היקרים המסלים בפז, היכן נחשבו לנבלי חרס, מעשה ידי יוצר, גם תנים חלצו שד, העניקו גוריהם, ותמי לאכזר, כי ינים המדבר. דבק לשון יונק, החיקו בצמא, עוללים שאלו לחם, פורס אין להם, האוכלים למדנים, נשמו בחוצות, אמונים עלי תולה, חיכו השפטות, ויגדל עוון בתמים, מחטאת סדום, הפוכה כמו רגע, לא חלו בידיים, זכו נזירי עמי שלג, זכו מחלב, קדמו עצם מפנינים, ספיר גזרתם. We're at verse 8 on page 42.
Now their faces are darker than blackness. They are not recognized in the streets. Their skin is shriveled upon their bones, withered as a stick. Those who were slain by the sword are better off than those who perished of hunger. For the latter pine away, stricken by pangs of hunger for the fruit of the field. Women formerly compassionate have sodden their own children, consuming them as food during the destruction of my people. The Lord has poured out his fury and given vent to his fierce anger. He has kindled a fire in Zion, which has burnt her to the very foundation. Neither kings nor inhabitants of the earth could believe that the adversary and the enemy should ever enter the gates of Jerusalem. It is because of the sins of her prophets and of the iniquities of her priests, who have shed there the blood of the righteous. These prophets and priests wander blindly in the streets, stained with blood, so that men cannot touch their garments. Men shout to them, "Be gone, you are unclean. Be gone, touch us not." When they fled away and wandered everywhere, men said, "You shall not live here." The Lord himself scattered them. He will no longer care for them, for they did not respect the faithful priests, nor were they gracious to the elders. Our eyes failed us as we looked in the vain for help. On our watchtower, we watched for a nation that could not save us. Besiegers watch our every move so that we cannot go out into the streets. Our end is near, our days are numbered, our time has come. Our pursuers were swifter than eagles of the heaven. They chased us upon the mountains and ambushed us in the wilderness. Our King, anointed of God, he of whom we said, under his protection we will live among the nations, was trapped in their pits. Rejoice and be glad with your short-lived triumph, O Edom, that dwells in the land of Uz. The cup of punishment will also be passed over to you, and you shall become debased and exposed to contempt.
Well,
O Zion, you have paid for your sins.
well.
No longer will God cause you to be exiled. O Edom, God shall punish your iniquity and uncover your sins.
So we're going to sing another melody as we come to this end of our service, and we're starting to think about the end of Tisha B'Av, where we turn from the last 3 weeks from being Ben Amitzarim, between the straits, to start to think about hope. And this coming Shabbat is Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort and consolation. And so we have a melody from Isaiah, Umacha Hashem, Elokim Dimami al Kol Panim. My God will wipe the tears away from all faces.
Umacha, Umacha, Umacha Adonai, Dema, Dema, Meyal, Kol Panim, Umacha, Umacha, Umacha Adonai, Dema, Dema, Meyal, Kol Panim, Umacha, Umacha, Umacha Adonai, Dima, Dima, Me'al Kol Panim, Umacha, Umacha, Umeacha Adonai, Dima, Dima, Me'al Kol Panim.
So let's turn to this end of our conversation and talk about acts of baseless love, Ahavat Chinam. What does that look like? How do we do that? Any thoughts?
I was listening to the radio today, and they had a man on whose young daughter was 7 years old and was shot by someone. The man who provided the gun was given parole to this man who shot the young girl, and so the father said to this guy that he hoped that he learned something from this experience, and wished him, that he understood better what happened, and that he would be okay. And to me, it seemed very gracious for his father to do that, considering what happened to his daughter.
Powerful, thank you. Anybody else?
Rabbi Zactavio again.
Hi.
I was reminded right now when you asked the question about a verse in the Torah that says, you should love your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And I was asking myself that question of where does that love comes from? And the answer that came to me was a place of deep honesty and vulnerability, right? So I'll share an experience.
Place of the what?
A place of deep honesty and vulnerability.
Okay.
And I was remembering something that happened not too long ago with my daughter. We were at the store, and there was a homeless man outside of the store. And my daughter says to me, "Dad, can you buy a big bottle of water?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "But why do you want it so big?" She's like, "No, just buy a big one." And I said, "Okay." So I bought her this big bottle of water, and she And I thought, well, why so big for her, right? She's a little girl. She's not going to drink this big bottle of water. But as we were walking out the store, she goes up to this homeless man and gives him the bottle of water. And to me, I was remembering that right now. And that was, for me, my daughter being vulnerable and having this love for no reason for another human being, right? And I think that is the purity of us being human and being able to love someone for no reason.
Beautiful. As you were talking, I thought how often it's our children who remind us of that kind of free love, baseless love, and opening our hearts to somebody we don't know. Anybody else? What is baseless love, or an example of baseless love? So one that's a little bit been over-reported in the media, but again, in the context of Israel, on 2 days ago, I guess it was, when they had two huge conflicting demonstrations, one anti-overhaul and one pro-overhaul. And there was Israel's a small country, and there's only one public transportation. So you have one group going this way, one group going the other way on the train. And I think it was, I didn't actually see the clip, but there's a clip of some people going up an escalator, the other group going down the escalator. And as they were passing each other, and it's obvious what each one is going to the completely opposite, and these forces are tearing apart the whole country. They started to say to each other, they love you and you're brothers and sisters, and they were so warm to each other, even though they hated each other, right? And I'm not sure if that's a little act, but just something like that sticks with one and reminds one that you can break the power of that hate as we've been talking about, is so strong and so instinctive and so visceral. You can break that with just a little act of love. And I remember once reading a story about someone who I think was traveling in the old country, and was talking about, well, what's all the big acts that can change a person's life. But this person said that once he was traveling in some shtetl, and some person, a stranger, had given him a smile that was so genuine and so real that it just totally just changed his outlook, his whole day. And I remember once when I was at a conference as a volunteer many years ago for world religions in Israel. And there were leaders from all over the world. I was a young volunteer helping out. And I befriended different groups of these world leaders. But one morning, it was early in the morning, and I had to work hard, and I was not feeling my best. And somehow this one Buddhist monk, who was the personal representative of the Dalai Lama, noticed it, came over to me, and just looked at me and gave me a big smile and said, how are you doing? Good morning, and everything. And kind of then walked away. And I thought, wow, somebody went out of their way just to try and uplift another human being. So anybody else? Acts of baseless love. How do we do more of them? What's stopping us? Is it easier to scream at someone than to be nice to them?
I think random or baseless acts of love are sort of the surplus, the overflow of organized acts of compassion. They come from a place of security.
So you're saying when you don't have security, it's very hard to do those kinds of acts, because you're in a state of having to survive and deal with. And I think that's a really, really interesting point. And so it's not easy to get to that baseless love. You have to really dig really deep within, and to create a structure for that is very powerful. as well. Anybody else?
I mean, for me, Tisha B'Av is about the destruction of the temple, but what about the temple inside, the Mishkan inside of us? What you were saying was, where I was thinking is that, we have to love ourselves. I mean, you have to, we have to love God with it, but really that's building inside of ourselves a place where we can be loving and kind and compassionate to ourselves in a healthy way, not in a way that, holds us unaccountable, but in a real healthy, compassionate, loving way to ourselves. And it's only when we can love and care about ourselves that then that flows out to other people. That's what I believe.
Maybe that's part of the security that John is talking. If you can have that love within yourself, then it's easier to give it to other people. It flows out. I've once heard a description of love. Love is not an emotion, but a state of mind of knowing you're one with other people. And so we experience this with our children. When I remember once, after I hadn't seen my daughter in a few days only, but I landed at the airport, she came running towards me with such joy to see me and jumped. And I thought, in that moment, I thought, we're one. There's no two. And it's that's what love is. When you're in love, makes you feel like you're one with others. And that takes away from, and it's the opposite, right? When you hate someone, then there's no stronger sense of separation than that sense of hate. And so what Aaron, what you were talking about, as the Baal Shem Tov says, where the third temple be, the third temple will be in our own hearts. So if you can hold that way of thinking about the world, then we can bring that to others. Anybody else have a thought? I think we're going to conclude the book first with some English, our last chapter.
Consider, O Lord, what has happened to us. Behold and see our humiliation. Our land is given over to strangers, our homes to aliens. We are as fatherless orphans. Our mothers are as widows. We pay dearly for the water we drink and the wood we use. We are pursued, and heavy is the yoke on our necks. We are weary and have no rest. To obtain bread, we have submitted to Egypt and to Assyria. Our fathers have sinned and are no longer among the living. We have borne the penalty of their guilt. Slaves rule over us, and there is none to rescue us. We obtain our bread at the peril of our lives because of the sword in the wilderness. Our skin glows like an oven because of the feverish heat of famine. They have ravished the women of Zion, the maidens in the cities of Judah.
Nobles are hung by them, and elders are outraged. Young men are forced to grind at the mill, and children stagger under loads of wood. Gone are the elders from the gates, and young men from their music. Gone are the delights of our hearts. Our dancing has turned into mourning. The crown of glory has fallen from our head. Woe unto us, for we have sinned. For all this our heart is faint. Because of these things our eyesight is dim. Foxes roam about the desolate mountain of Zion. Thou, O Lord, shalt reign forever. Thy throne is for eternity. Why dost thou forget us forever and forsake us for so long? Turn us unto thee, O Lord, that we may return. Restore our days as of old. Thou hast utterly rejected us. Thou hast been exceedingly angry with us. Turn us unto thee, O Lord, that we may return. Restore our days as of old.
We're going to repeat the last few verses, starting with 19 in Hebrew, and please join me at the end as we sing Hashivenu together. Verse 19. Ata Adonai לעולם תשב כיסך לדור ודור. למה לנצח תשכחנו, תעזבנו לאורך ימים. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. כי אם מעוז מאסתנו, קצבת עלינו עד מאוד. השיבנו, השיבנו, אדוני אליך, ונשובה, ונשובה, חדש, חדש, ימינו כקדם.
Thank you. And we customary to sing Elit Zion on page 48, Kina, Lament.
אלי ציון ויריה כמו אישה בציריה, וחייב תולך הנגורת שק על בעל נעוריה, עלי ארמון אשר ניטש באשמת צאן עדריה, ועל ביד מחרפל בתוך מקדש חדריה. אלי ציון ויריה כמו אשתה בציריה, וכיבתו לך חגורת שק על בעל נעוריה. ועלי גילות משרתי אל, מנימי שיר זמריה, ועל דמם אשר שופך כמו מימי יעוריה. אלי ציון ויריה כמו אישה בציריה, וכיבתו לך חגורת שק על בעל נעוריה. Okay, yeah. On the back of the book, we have a few songs. We have at the bottom of page 58, A. At the bottom, this is by Hannah Sanish. Eli, שלא ייגמר לעולם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם. ירושלים. מעל פסקת הר הצופים, שלום לך ירושלים. מעל פסקת הר הצופים, אשתחווה לך אפיים. מהדורות חלמתי עלייך, לזכות לראות באור פנייך. ירושלים, ירושלים, העירי פנייך לבנך. ירושלים, ירושלים, מחורבותייך אבנך.
So we turn to the Kaddish Shalem on page 51. But on this day of Tisha B'Av, we leave out one of the verses, as we do in the house of mourning, the verse where we ask God to hear our prayers. Titkabel. So we're on page 51.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך רבו, וילמד דברי קדותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחיי חון ובני חון, ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבו מברך, לעלם עלל מעלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו אלא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמם יאמרו אמן. יש לומר רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו
Amen. Please rise for Aleinu, page 53.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא שונות השמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. Ein Od, ein Od. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו, אחד ושמו, אחד ושמו, אחד ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. We turn to our mourner's Kaddish on page 55. If you're observing a yard site or in mourning, please rise and join me in the words of the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yalmad divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei lechol Beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kariv v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam amen. יפרח וישתבח ויפאר ויתחומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרב מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום ממרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו
Amen.
amen. But this concludes our service, and as we go into the rest of Tisha B'Av, I'd like to first invite everyone to join us tomorrow morning for our minions. We'll read through Eicha again and think about and chant and sing. And then this weekend is Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of consolation, that begins 7 weeks of consolation, taking us all the way to the high holidays, a special period. And we'll be having musical Shabbat on Shabbat morning, Saturday morning. I think will be very special. And just to leave everyone with the thought to invite everyone to think about acts of baseless love, of random love over the next day, and see how we can bring that into our life. Some call an easy fast. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us online.
Good night. Everybody at home.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night.
Thank you.